For you purists who love the blocking and tackling, the spring game is not necessarily your flavor, but it is a little bit of football, throwing the ball around and getting a look at the scarlet and gray for one final time in the spring before we head toward August. And, of course, Ryan Day's first team to hit the field there in 2019. We got Tony Gerdeman on the line from the Ozone to talk Ohio State football. This, of course, Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Tony, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good. And, I gave you my trials and travails in trying to track not just Ohio State spring game, but Notre Dame was playing Nebraska, all sorts of teams early in the day. And the cable company was not kind to me, but I did catch quite a bit. So we'll start with the quarterback competition, of course, if that is a competition. I thought that Justin Fields ripped off a few nice throws, and he also turned the corner once and showed that kind of explosion that we expect to see this fall.
Yeah, the running aspect, which Buckeye fans didn't get to see last year, nobody really saw last year with Dwayne Haskins, even though it's been there every year before, with JT Barrett and Braxton Miller. But we definitely got to see him use his speed, use his ability to get out of trouble. But with the two-hand touch on the quarterbacks, he could only do so much. But I think it gives you an indication of what the offense will look like this season. And even if he doesn't have complete command of the offense, if he's got 85% command, the extra 15 he can make up with his legs easily. And they will also use his legs to where they wouldn't ask him to do something he can't do, and then just work on what he is good at and then build from there if he does win the job. And every indication right now is that he's in the lead, but there's still an off season. There's still a summer camp where things can happen. I know I'd say 99% of the people believe that Justin Fields will be the starter and that there's not really a competition, but he has to maintain a level or else he won't be starting. That's, if people want to say that he's been anointed, that's fine, but he can lose the job by not playing well in a camp. I mean, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah, the team is good enough around him that I don't think the coaching staff, regardless of his amount of hype and blue chip status coming into the program, would sabotage a season with a quarterback who can't comprehend the offense or execute the offense in favor of somebody. If they just get serviceable quarterback play, if Matthew Baldwin throws 25 touchdowns and 10 picks and is serviceable, they probably have enough to contend for a Big Ten championship, if not win it for sure. So they don't need the quarterback messing up the rest of the team. You obviously want him to be an addition to the dynamic talent they have elsewhere and be Justin Fields that's expected to show up and then contend for winning all the games or only losing one and being in the mix for a playoff spot.
Yeah, many a Big Ten title has been won by a serviceable quarterback. Absolutely.
No question about that. And Matthew Baldwin's performance, how would you rate what you got to see there?
It's what we saw during the spring where he wasn't always accurate, but still was able to make some throws and can run a little bit. Was more accurate than Justin Fields, but I try to remind people last year that Dwayne Haskins was 9 of 19 and Joe Burrow was something like, 15 of 22. And, we saw what happened with Dwayne Haskins. So, don't put too much stock into a spring game performance. It's one of 15 practices in the spring, and it's one of 30 or so before the game actually starts in August 31st. But it's one of the more important practices. It's the one where you get to see the coaches like to see the players in a big crowd. Not every school can do that. Ohio State had 61,000 or 62,000 yesterday due to some renovations. So it was his first opportunity, Justin Fields' first opportunity to play in front of the crowd, but also Matthew Baldwin's first real opportunity and chance to play on Ohio Stadium turf in front of a crowd, because he didn't play at all last year. In the spring game last year, he was still recovering from an ACL tear the December before. So this is a brand new opportunity, brand new situation for him. I think just based on what we know of both quarterbacks, I think they would be fine with either. Now, the ceilings between the two are a little bit different, but I don't know that they would need somebody to reach their ceiling to reach their goal. You know, if you follow, like, I don't think they needed Dwayne Haskins to play as well as he did last year to win a national title. They just needed a better defense.
Yeah, that would have helped. We will get to that. The one thing I will put stock in, talking about placing stock in certain performances based on your first evaluation, and then what I saw of Garrett Wilson, just the fluidity of catching the ball and then being able to spin and just make guys miss in the secondary, and he looked the part.
Yeah, he does not look like a freshman. You know, he's right now, he was third on the depth chart, but that's not going to last for long. And even if you are third on the depth chart on some of these positions at Ohio State, you're still good enough to play, so you will play. And he's one of those guys, you know, it would be a waste of talent to keep him on the bench, you know, this season. And they rotate their receivers. They usually have, you know, 6 starters, as they've had since about 2013 or so. And they may have 8 this year that they just continue to roll through. And he's one of those guys who plays, he's maybe 6 foot 6'1", but you saw on his touchdown catch, plays like he's 6'3" or 6'4" when it's necessary. He can go up and get the ball. He just understands, you know, spatial awareness is one of the things that coaches like to talk about in basketball. You know, he's got it in football, and he can get around guys. He's fast. You mentioned he's elusive. He's just very, very natural and never looks overwhelmed. And, you know, he's working on his blocking. That's going to be the thing that maybe dictates more than anything else how much he plays. But he got in early. You know, he enrolled in the winter. He's worked on it. He's getting stronger by the day. They work on his blocking constantly, and he's a willing blocker. And I think, you know, once the season gets here, he's going to be a regular. And I mean, he'll be a regular because he's irregular. You know, he's different than most freshmen.
Yeah, and so there's some things, especially with the non-tackling format in the spring game, that we can and cannot take away. And that's one thing I will take away is when you've got wide receivers, regardless of slot or out wide versus DBs, you see the one-on-one matchup, and it's just like football on Saturday. Then you have offensive and defensive linemen going at it, and that's generally, except for the scheme and the vanilla aspect of the defense, you can take something away from that. In terms of tackling and breaking tackles, we can't judge the escapability of the quarterback very well. You can't judge the ability to break tackles from the running back position or to secure tackles from the linebackers and the safeties in particular. So your thoughts about a defense that obviously was blowing situations out of place, but also blowing tackles, and that can't be evaluated based on yesterday.
Yeah, and a lot of what you would be looking for is, are the guys in the right place? You know, the thud tempo is what they call it, and, you know, the thud tackling, and are the linebackers hitting the running backs, you know, 2 yards past the line of scrimmage rather than not getting there? And there really were no significantly long runs or home runs yesterday that maybe we definitely saw last year. And a lot of that is, you know, keeping the linebackers back a little bit, keeping them a little more patient, having one deep safety a lot of the time deeper than normal or deeper than they have been in the past. So they're guarding against those big plays. And I was at a Ohio State coaches clinic that they hold every year, the Thursday and Friday before the spring game, and each of the Ohio State coaches present to the Ohio high school coaches, you know, different things that they're teaching. And Greg Madison talked about how in college football today, you can't stop big plays. You can only really limit them. And he talked about the lengths that they go to limit the plays. And if you give up, you know, a 20-yarder, you know, that's much better than 80 yards. But ideally, one of the things he talked about is as a defender, you don't want to follow your own jersey in pursuit. You want to take a little bit different angle, maybe further upfield, so that, because if the guy in front of you is late and you're following him, then obviously you're going to be late. So they're doing a lot of things to work on stopping those big plays. They tackle and they work on tackling in a lot of drills. There's not a lot of live tackling. And really the NCAA dictates how many of your spring practices can have tackling. I think it's maybe 8. But they work on controlled environment tackling. And really, I know a lot of Ohio State fans, when you talk about bringing Greg Madison and Al Washington over from Michigan, and they look at the score that Ohio State put on Michigan last year, and they're like, well, why would you want those people? And you got to remember, they're not bringing Don Brown's defense. And Don Brown is Michigan's defensive coordinator. They're not bringing his defense over. They're bringing in some coaches, Greg Madison and Jeff Hafley, the co-defensive coordinator that they got from San Francisco, together with Larry Johnson. These guys are all, building and melding Ohio State's defense to fit what they have. And I think what we saw Saturday with the linebackers is, they are playing more zone, and they've been doing that a lot this spring. Whereas, the Michigan linebackers were all in man last year, and that's why you saw guys just running here to there, the slot receivers for Ohio State running everywhere they wanted because the linebackers couldn't keep up with them. What the Buckeyes are doing now is they're maybe dropping off a little bit more, playing some more zone, and just, like I said, hoping to limit those big plays. And that, like you said, you can't really judge the tackling, but we didn't see a lot of, open field guys that just, there was nobody there at the line of scrimmage to stop them. And so I guess that would be a positive to take from the defense.
I'm going to de-emphasize the spring game all by itself and get your thoughts about the running back position after J.K. Dobbins in totality, because Master Teague had a big touchdown run or two, and Marcus Crowley and so forth. So again, because of the lack of tackling and not being able to see if a guy can bust a tackle, your thoughts about the backups to J.K. Based on the totality of spring practice.
Yeah, those two, Master Teague and Marcus Crowley, I liked in the spring game how patient they were. You saw a couple of runs where Master Teague was basically attached to his blocker and wouldn't leave him until, he needed to. So I like that patience. Marcus Crowley's a tough kid who doesn't mind contact. And, this is not the game for him, basically, because, it's not really allowed. But the most disappointing thing all spring for the Buckeyes in terms of the running backs is that Demario McCall hasn't been able to practice. And he is maybe the most dynamic player on the field for the Buckeyes when he's out there. And not having him out there, Ryan Day has plans for him. Everybody on this offense has plans for him, but they didn't have a chance to put any of that stuff in this spring, or at least see how it would go this spring, because he wasn't able to go. He is dealing with a calf injury. And now all expectations are that he'll be fine and they can work on that stuff in the summer or in fall camp. But, not having him out there and seeing how he works and maybe getting some two tailback sets with those two. And, Demario, he was an H-back last year, so he played in the slot some, and he can pass, he can catch passes. And saw in the Michigan game a wheel route with Devin Bush in coverage, who could not keep up with Demario McCall. And we all know how fast Devin Bush is. So McCall is another guy to watch. So I really like their running backs. J.K. Dobbins is the true junior, looking for this to be his last season. If he plays like he did as a freshman rather than a sophomore. And I think we've talked before about how he wants to get back to being like he was his freshman year, and has worked in the offseason and worked in spring practice to regain that form and regain that hunger.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Buckeyes following the annual Scarlet and Gray game in front of 61,000. The crowd was limited. That obviously a huge crowd for most spring games, but at Ohio Stadium because of some renovations there. A couple guys that flashed for me, and would like to get your thoughts, not necessarily on these guys, but whoever else as a young player flashed for you. Would be Noah Potter, saw him make a couple plays, and Tyreek Smith.
Yeah, Tyreek Smith is going to have to play a lot this year. He'll be in that defensive end rotation. I talked to him about it after the game, and he was a guy that was in that rushman package last year as a true freshman. And what the rushman is, it's 4 defensive ends on passing downs generally, although Draymond Jones, defensive tackle, was in there last year. But he's going to be in there again this year. He'll be rotating with Jonathan Cooper and Chase Young, and if we'll see if another guy can get into that rotation. But yeah, Tyreek Smith is maybe the next great, Ohio State defensive end. And the expectations, I talked to Larry Johnson when Tyreek Smith signed, and to me, he reminds me of Tyquan Lewis, the former Buckeye defensive end, Big Ten defensive lineman of the year. And I was like, Larry, he looks like a clone. He's like, he is. He's a clone of Tyquan Lewis, who is now with the Colts. And that's a good example to follow. Let's see who else. You said Noah Potter, wearing 97, which is a bold strategy for a defensive end at Ohio State to follow in the Bosa's footsteps. But he's played well. The other freshman defensive end, Zach Harrison, we didn't really see much of him on Saturday. But the week before, during a scrimmage that we got to see, he had 3 sacks. And it's similar to a sack in the spring game where, you get a hand or two on the quarterback and they blow him dead. But, you talk about Zach Harrison, you talk about Noah Potter. They are the 6th and 7th defensive ends, in the rotation right now. And another one would be redshirt freshman Javonte Jean-Baptiste, who I think led everybody with 6 tackles yesterday and had a sack and a forced fumble. So that's another guy, and he's maybe the 5th defensive end, So that tells you how deep they are at that position, and they've got some young guys, and they'll all need to step up after next year when you lose Chase Young a year early to the NFL and Jonathan Cooper to graduation. But yeah, so they're good there, and really just the entire defense, the front 7, I was impressed with in terms of. There were just no huge open gaps that, we saw somebody just running through. And I think that's a positive sign because they were also without Tuff Borland. So and the middle linebacker. So they were able to see their 2 younger guys. Well, although Baron Browning's a junior now. So, how young are they really? But just a good chance to see the guys who you didn't really get to see last year.
And there was an emphasis during the Big Ten Network broadcast. They talked about Tyreek Smith gravitating to Nick Bosa and his kind of mentorship of, okay, you're the next guy in line in regards to you got the potential. I see this in you to be able to be, a standout player at this level. So, watch the workouts, watch what I do, how dedicated I am, pick up some of the techniques, pass rush moves, and so forth to get yourself set to kind of be the next wave.
Yeah, and talking to Larry Johnson about he said, as a coach, you have to spend hours and hours at looking at videotape to find the little ways to make guys, to take them from a great player to an elite player. And he talked about doing that with Chase Young, where he's really good and you have to look hard to find ways to make him better. And, with talking to Tyreek Smith yesterday, how does Larry Johnson work with him? And, it's a matter of looking at every rep. Sometimes his foot is too high before, his get off before the ball is snapped. And it's just really little things in the fundamentals that you get down. And then you're also learning different techniques in terms of getting off of your blocks and rips and swims and all of this and just putting it all together. And he's only a sophomore, but he's going to be one to watch. Definitely. They need him to step up this year.
All right. You hear the information and insight. Check out Tony's work there at theozone.net. And the podcast, when does that come out each and every week?
Generally every Wednesday, the Buckeye Weekly podcast, where we recap, coaches and players we've talked to. Sometime then after every game, we'll have one that we drop on Saturday or Sunday morning as well. So hit theozone.net. There's links on the top left for podcasts, and you'll find us there.
Excellent. Thanks for stopping by, Tony. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you.